Hello to all of you wonderful mothers and fathers who are proactively learning to become better parents. In my point of view, once we become parents, we live for our children. It's our duty and delight to sacrifice so that our children can lead better lives than we do. How you measure better will vary from family to family. But in general, if we raise children that do better and accomplish more than we do, then we have succeeded as parents. This is the Dad Smarter, Not Harder podcast, and I'm your host, June Loaiza, and I now live in Orange County, California with my loving wife and two wonderful daughters who are now 5 and 3. Yes, it's been a while since my last podcast, but I've been using this time to meditate and further develop my framework for better parenting. In addition, I have a new office setup, so these podcasts will be published on YouTube, your favorite podcast player, and published in written form on Substack as well. Links to all those locations will be provided in the comments section. Today's topic is smartphones for kids. My daughters were born in the Bay Area in California, and in the Bay Area, parents are very strict with screen time. Personally, I love it, as we're strict with screen time in our household as well. At home, our children get to watch one show per day, and they're actually watching that show right now while I film this, except for Saturday nights when they can also watch a movie. We are also very intentional with how our children get screen time. When they watch a show, it's streamed on the television only. We never allow them to watch a show on the mobile phone as we want to avoid them getting used to using the phone as a means to satisfy boredom. But if I'm so strict with phone use, then you may be asking yourself, why does the title of this podcast suggest that we should give smartphones to our children? Well, it all starts with a chemical in our brain called dopamine and how it affects our drive and ambition. Dopamine is a chemical in the brain that is released when we get a reward, but more importantly, it is released in anticipation of the reward. This is key because dopamine drives us, motivates us to achieve something. It can be as simple as getting a drink of water when we're thirsty, or as complicated as writing a book or creating a presentation for a client. All of this is possible because of dopamine. Now, what is important to understand about dopamine is that we all have a baseline. Some of us who are incredibly motivated have a high baseline, while others who are more relaxed and chill may have a lower baseline of dopamine. When we achieve something great or have an intense feeling of pleasure, then our dopamine spikes. This is the euphoria we feel when we get a promotion or when our child is born. And most importantly, after the spike, our dopamine levels drop below baseline. That's right, they drop below our normal baseline dopamine level, so we feel a bit lethargic or down. Don't worry, this is perfectly normal and explains why many parents feel postpartum depression. After such a high of your child being born, your dopamine plummets and you feel a bit depressed. Now, what does this have to do with parenting our children and smartphones? Well, turns out absolutely everything. When children are scrolling on YouTube or TikTok, every swipe down to see more videos triggers a spike of dopamine. Every time they see a video that they like, it triggers a spike of dopamine. And what happens after the spike? Well, their dopamine levels drop below baseline. But kids don't just stop there because they want to get another dopamine release. And because it's so easy to just continue swiping and watching the next video, they'll continue to scroll until they find another video that spikes their dopamine. But this is the ladder to lethargy. Your child's dopamine spikes up, then falls below baseline. Then it spikes up again, then it falls even lower and lower and lower. This can lead to addiction. This can lead to a lack of motivation because of all their dopamine is being taken up by their phone. This can lead to a lack of interest in anything outside of YouTube and TikTok because their brain is being trained to only release dopamine when they watch YouTube and TikTok. This is the toxic spiral that I want you to be aware of and that we need to protect our children from at all costs. But again, you may be thinking, June, If the goal is to protect them from the downward spiral of phone use, why is the title of this podcast about giving a smartphone to your children? Well, look at our parents. They grew up in a world without the internet, smartphones, and social media, and yet our parents' generation is some of the most addicted to social media. They're the only ones using Facebook, for goodness sakes. So, we can conclude that a lack of phone use as a child does not translate to disciplined phone use as an adult. No, we should not ban phone use from our children. Instead, we need to teach them self-control. We need to teach our children how to use their phone responsibly and not have the phone use them. Okay, so how can we teach our children self-control and responsible phone use? Here we go. Number 1, stop using your phone in front of your children for anything other than urgent needs. Look, we all need to use our phone. I get it. We need to order food, call family, text our friends. But keep all this to a minimum when you're with your children and completely avoid looking at Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube while you're with your children. Children model our behavior, and it has to start with us. Number 2, give them the opportunities to practice discipline through responsibility. Responsibility is the R in my GRACE framework for parenting. By giving them the opportunity to practice self-control with a device, they gain confidence and build mental memory to use devices for only a limited amounts of time. We do this at my home in 2 ways. The first way is when my children are using their iPad. My 5-year-old decides for how long she wants to work on her iPad. Keep in mind the use of work when on the iPad, not play. For example, if she decides 20 minutes, then her and my 3-year-old set the timer for 20 minutes. When the timer goes off, they're responsible for putting the iPad away without me telling them to do it. This is the key. They need to do it out of their own volition. Of course, this takes practice, but anything can become muscle memory. And if it's them doing it themselves, then they're learning that they have the discipline and self-control to control their screen time. The second way is when my children watch TV, like right now. I leave the remote control with my 5-year-old, and she is responsible for turning off the television when the show is over. I don't need to remind her or ask her to do it. She knows that when the show is over, it's time to turn it off and work on something else. Number 3, teach your children that boredom is good and can be a time for meditation. Remember what we learned about dopamine? It spikes, it drops, and it takes a while for it to recover back to baseline. So if it's low, we will have very low motivation. A great way to increase your baseline level of dopamine is through meditation. This practice of mindfulness can reduce our urges to spike our dopamine through unproductive means like watching TikTok and reserve them for more productive activities such as learning or reading a book. At home, I teach my children to lean into the boredom. Boredom is good because it gives your mind a chance to wander, to reflect, to find your inspiration. We don't practice it every day, but we often will sit down together, close our eyes, and take our deep breaths to practice meditation. And lastly, number 4, when your children are ready, you will give them a phone for limited amounts of time so that they can practice self-control and discipline with the device on hand. Keep in mind, my children are not yet ready for a phone. They're too young and still have a lot of self-discipline to practice. But when I do give them a phone, we will continue to practice self-control together, and I will not ban YouTube or social media. Why? Because when you ban something, it makes them crave it even more. Tell your daughter that she's not allowed to go on dates, and the first thing that she'll do is go behind you and date a guy who doesn't have a problem sneaking her out of the house. Practice makes better, and it's important to practice phone use with your children so that they can understand the feelings of being hooked to it. If they understand it and practice controlling it, then they will never fall victim to phone use and be able to maintain strong levels of dopamine baseline for their motivation and drive. Thank you for being here with me. I'm June Loaiza. This is the Dad Smarter, Not Harder podcast, and my mission is to help you become the best parent that you can be. Hit me up on Twitter for a chat, and I'll see you on the next one.